Hey there, sixth grade. As we look to wrap up our year in social studies, we're going to finish up by continuing with the Constitution, but not the actual beginning document. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the Bill of Rights, and I'm going to give you a very brief tour of, I think you're going to get the first half of it today. And then tomorrow you'll get the next installment. But the first half is kind of the one, it's the part of the Bill of Rights that people are most familiar with. But we got to kind of wonder exactly what are we talking about here? What is the Bill of Rights? The Bill of Rights is part of the Constitution, and it includes the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. And most of you are like, okay, what is an amendment? Wait a minute, what's an amendment? An amendment is when something is being amended or they're amending it. Okay. Wait, that doesn't really help. Let me try this. Yeah, okay. An alteration of or an addition to a motion, bill, constitution, something like that. So that's kind of what we're talking about. It's an addition to. So the amendments to the Constitution are additional things that were added on afterward. Now, the Constitution was designed to set up the structure of the government and give the powers of the government so that everybody understood exactly what those were. That was all well and good. But there's got to be a backstory to why they needed to start making amendments almost immediately after they wrote the thing. Because I thought it was like this awesome, perfect thing. Why do they need to fix it right away? And that's a fair question. So what happened was many people thought that the Constitution focused too much on the power of the government and very little on the basic rights of the citizens. So the Bill of Rights is kind of a list of the things that the government can't do. It's really what it comes down to. It's a list of your protections as a citizen of our country, and it tells us what the government can't do to us. So it's a very unique and very important part of the document. And they needed 10 of them to get it done. So let's go through the first several of these today. And the first few are probably the most the most well-known ones. They're all important, but let's see what we got here. So the Bill of Rights contains amendments, and each one has its own particular special, value to the citizens. The first one is a big one, and it's a complicated one. It's the freedom of speech, religion, press, assembly, and petition. Now, we commonly just know this as the freedom of speech, and it reads like this: Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right of people to peaceably assemble, and to petition the government for redress of grievances. So let's kind of break this down a little bit. This one is the most complicated of all of them, but for many, it's the most important of all of them. It gives us the freedom of speech. It allows us to speak our minds freely without fear that the government will come and arrest us. It allows the press to report honestly and openly about things going on with our government, and the government cannot shut them down. It allows us to assemble peacefully and not starting fights and riots, but it allows us to get together peacefully to make a claim if we're feeling there's a problem. And it also allows us to choose how we worship. So there's a lot of different things going on in that one, but they all kind of come back to the same idea. So here's what it doesn't do, and this is kind of important. Freedom of speech doesn't give you the right to just say threatening things, start panics, fire in a movie theater. You're not allowed to do that, but you are allowed to express yourself openly and offer your opinions at any time without fear that the government is going to come do something to you. It protects you from saying bad things about the government, but it doesn't protect you about saying bad things about other people and the way they might react to it. So freedom of speech really has to do with the government not being able to arrest you for saying a bad thing about the government. It's the one that says you're allowed to say Donald Trump is a big fat dope, and they can't come arrest you for it. And they can't also come arrest you later and say, I think Donald Trump was the greatest one ever. Either way, the government has no right to tell you what you can say with regard to that. If you say something nasty about your neighbor, you're going to have to deal with your neighbor. That has nothing to do with the freedom of speech. Freedom of religion basically means that if you choose to worship a certain way, no one can tell you that you're not allowed to do that. Doesn't mean you can tell others how they should. And it also means that the government will never establish a single religion. Okay. Now, peaceful assembly, I also talked about this. You are allowed to get together and watch the news, because you're already seeing peaceful assemblies, and some people are feeling like they're not so peaceful in some parts of the country, where people are getting together to complain about things going on with the government. And it's an interesting expression of people's First Amendment rights. And then finally, the press. The government can't tell CNN or the Chicago Tribune what they're allowed to print in their newspapers or on their TV stations. They're not allowed to decide what they do, but it also doesn't mean that you have to agree with things that people put in certain newspapers or on certain websites or certain TV channels. That's up to you to decide. The government has no say in it. Notice all of these things come back to what the government can do. It has nothing to do with the people can do. It's about restricting the government's rights. So the Second Amendment is another big one, complicated, and it has also changed over time because of the way the world has changed over time. It's simply the right to bear arms. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So basically it says you are allowed to own a gun to protect your family. That's the basic line of it. Now, there are lots of things that have changed since this was written in 1791 that make it more complicated. And some people are upset about this and think it needs to change. And some people say, no, it doesn't need to change. It's a very complicated thing. Here's a few things that the Second Amendment doesn't really allow you to do. It doesn't allow you to go shooting at things, animals, people, places, their houses, their cars, shooting tires out. Anything that endangers others is still illegal. You're allowed to own a gun for protection, but you can't go shooting it off in your backyard. That's because it's dangerous to other people. You can't own an F-15 or a nuclear warhead because those are not for defending yourself. Those are weapons of active war, not the kind of thing. Even if you had the money, you're not allowed to own them. So there are some restrictions. And saying that you can't have certain types of weapons doesn't mean you can't have one at all. So this is where it gets a little complicated. And you can't use your weapons to go and try to take over City Hall. That's not okay. So again, it has to do with how you use, you have the right to own things for protection, but you can't use them in a dangerous or illegal way. Now, the Third Amendment is a quick one. It basically undoes the Quartering Act. It says that the government's not allowed to put soldiers up in your house in a time of peace unless there's a new law passed that says so. It will never happen because of the Third Amendment. The Fourth Amendment and the Fifth Amendment kind of go together. The first one has to do with arrests and searches, which basically means that if somebody suspects you've done something wrong, police don't have the right to just come and search your property. It reads, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, homes, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause supported by an oath or affirmation of particularly describing the place to be searched and or the persons or things to be seized. So they can't just kick your door in and start taking your stuff and start looking through your stuff. That's something that used to happen under the king. The British soldiers would just come in, kick a store open and start just taking stuff. What are you going to do about it? That is now illegal. Now, this has also changed over the last couple of 100 years now that we have electronic property. Things we've written, our records, our documents, that stuff is all still protected. It's yours. Your property is your property. The police can't just come in and take it. If they have a really good reason to, they might be able to. And that gets us to the Fifth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment has to do with the rights of people who are accused of a crime. These are all really good because it protects from a tyrannical government. The government can't just start doing stuff to you without this part, what we call a fair trial and due process. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless upon presentment of an indictment of the grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces of the military, when actual service in time of war or public danger. So break it down simply. If you get not convicted, but accused of a crime, they can't just throw you in jail and make you sit there. You have to get a trial. You have the right to a fair hearing so that a jury can hear you, and a couple other things. So if you're accused, they can't just throw you in jail without a trial. Everyone, it doesn't matter how guilty you are, you still get the right of a trial. You also don't have to incriminate yourself. If they make you talk badly against yourself, you can just say, nope. And you might have heard the phrase, I take the fifth. Taking the fifth means that you don't have to say anything that's going to get you in more trouble than you're already in. It's an important one. Okay, so those are the first 5 amendments. Now, I'm going to see how much you were paying attention here. I did tell you to take notes in the assignment, so hopefully you did. I'm going to ask you a few questions that relate to the content of this video and this PowerPoint. So once you're done with this, I have a short activity for you to complete. I'd like you to take care of that. It won't take you very long, and I'll have another one for you tomorrow. Thank you very much for watching.